The ultimatum. It was an ordinary Wednesday when the stars disappeared over Manhattan. The massive Draylen warship slid into position above New York City with barely a sound, its obsidian hull swallowing sunlight and casting a shadow that stretched across boroughs. Within hours, similar vessels appeared over Beijing, Moscow, London, and Delhi, enormous black monoliths hanging in the sky, each one larger than the largest human skyscraper turned on its side. Captain Maya Chen was having coffee in the UN Plaza when it happened. Her diplomatic corps training hadn't covered first contact scenarios, but then again, no one's had. As screens across the city flickered with emergency broadcasts, her secure phone vibrated with an urgent recall to headquarters. Captain Chen, General Rivera greeted her as she entered the hastily assembled command center beneath the UN building. Looks like those xenolinguistics courses you took might finally pay off. The room buzzed with activity. Military personnel from a dozen nations huddled around displays. Intelligence officers whispered into headsets, and frightened diplomats argued over protocol. On the main screen, a high-resolution image of the fleet showed smaller craft deploying around the primary vessels. "They're transmitting," announced a communications officer. "All frequencies, all languages. They've hacked into our global telecommunications network." The message appeared simultaneously on screens worldwide, translated perfectly into 147 human languages. "To the governing authorities of Earth, the Draylen Confederacy acknowledges your civilization's development and offers membership under protected status. Diplomatic representatives will arrive at your United Nations facility in 24 hours to outline integration procedures. Resource assessments will commence immediately. Resistance is unnecessary and discourage." In the tense hours that followed, Earth's nations did something unprecedented. They cooperated. Old enemies shared intelligence, rival powers pooled resources, and competing agencies coordinated response plans. Maya found herself assigned to the primary analysis team, tasked with understanding exactly what the aliens were proposing. "They're not asking," Maya said, looking up from translations of subsequent communications. The room fell silent as leaders turned toward her. Her finger traced lines in the alien document displayed on her tablet. "Look at the language here. Resource allocation quotas, developmental oversight, cultural preservation zones. This isn't an alliance. It's a protectorate agreement." UN Secretary General Okafor nodded grimly. "Colonization by another name." "What about their technology?" asked the Chinese representative. "If we accept their terms, would we gain access?" Maya shook her head. "There are explicit restrictions on technology transfers. Section 12 outlines appropriate technological advancement schedules. They'd control what we get and when we get it. What happens if we say no?" The question came from President Garcia, her voice steady despite the enormity of the situation. General Rivera cleared his throat. "Their fleet outguns us by magnitudes we can't even calculate. We have no effective defense against whatever weapons they might deploy. They haven't threatened us directly," Maya pointed out. "The message discourages resistance but doesn't specify consequences." As dawn approached, world leaders convened for the most consequential vote in human history. Maya stood in the back of the room, watching the debate unfold. Some nations favored immediate acceptance, hoping to secure advantageous positions in whatever new order emerged. Others advocated stalling tactics, accept provisionally while secretly preparing countermeasures. It was the representative from Kenya who changed the direction of the discussion. "My people know what it means when a technologically superior power arrives offering protection," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "We know the true cost of submission. If humanity is to end, let it end standing, not on its knees." The room grew still. Maya watched as faces changed, resolve hardening across political and national divisions. When Secretary General Okafor called for a final decision, the vote was unexpectedly unanimous. 23 hours after the ships appeared, humanity delivered its response. Maya stood beside world leaders as the message was transmitted. The nations of Earth acknowledged the Draylan Confederacy's communication. After careful consideration, we respectfully decline your current proposal. While we welcome peaceful contact with other civilizations, we find the terms presented do not reflect the mutual respect necessary for productive dialogue. We remain open to future discussions based on principles of equality and sovereignty. The transmission ended, and the world held its breath. For 12 long minutes, there was no response. Then, one by one, the massive ships darkened. Their lights, which had pulsed with alien energy since their arrival, went out. They became perfect black silhouettes against the sky, utterly silent and still. Are they powering down or powering up? Someone whispered. No one knew. For the next 48 hours, the vessels remained dark and silent. No further communications came. No smaller craft deployed. No weapons fired. They simply hung in the sky like enormous question marks, while beneath them, humanity prepared for whatever might come next. Military forces worldwide mobilized. Civilians in major cities evacuated to rural areas. Scientists worked frantically to understand any aspect of the alien technology they could observe. And in secured bunkers beneath key cities, human leaders waited for the response that would determine Earth's fate. Maya didn't leave the command center, catching short naps on a cot in the corner. She pored over the alien messages, searching for nuances or hidden meanings they might have missed. On the second night of silence, she noticed something in the communication patterns. "General," she called, waving Rivera over to her workstation. "I've been analyzing their transmission protocols. There's something odd about how they communicate internally." "Explain," he said, leaning over her shoulder. "Their fleet vessels exchange data constantly, but the pattern suggests they're not just reporting status. They're consulting. Each ship appears to be semi-autonomous, but they reach consensus before acting." "Meaning?" "Meaning they might not have anticipated our response. They're deliberating." As dawn broke on the third day, the alien ships reactivated simultaneously. Lights rippled across their hulls, and sensors detected massive energy surges within each vessel. Communication channels worldwide received a new transmission. "Your response is unprecedented. The Grand Arbiter of the Draylan Confederacy will arrive to address this anomaly personally. Prepare your representatives for direct negotiation." Below the message was a set of coordinates in the Pacific Ocean, and a time. 12 hours from now. Secretary General Okafor looked at the assembled leaders. "Well," she said with a thin smile, "it seems we got their attention." Part 2. Humanity's Stand. The Draylan High Council chamber erupted in chaos. Arbiter Vexral slammed his four-fingered hand against the illuminated table, causing the holographic displays to flicker. "Impossible," he growled, silver eyes narrowing to slits. "No pre-interstellar species has ever rejected Confederate protection. It violates all predictive models." Across the council table, Overseer Kirazana tilted her elongated head. "Perhaps our approach was flawed. The standard integration protocol assumes a rational response to overwhelming force." "Are you suggesting these humans are irrational?" asked another counselor. "I'm suggesting," Kirazana replied carefully, "that our understanding of their rationality may be incomplete." The Arbiter's tertiary eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep agitation among the Draylan. The humans occupy a resource-rich world in a strategically valuable sector. Their acceptance is preferable, but not required. Yet immediate subjugation presents risks, offered military commander Drestar. Their technology is primitive, but advancing rapidly. Our intelligence suggests unusual problem-solving capabilities. If resistance becomes widespread, the resource expenditure to maintain control would be significant. For 7 cycles, the council debated. Their discussion moved from outrage to curiosity, and finally to cautious reassessment. The humans had done something unprecedented, and for a civilization as ancient as the Draylan Confederacy, the unprecedented warranted investigation. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity prepared with grim determination. Captain Maya Chen stood on the deck of the aircraft carrier Resolute, watching helicopters ferry in delegates from around the world. The meeting site, a hastily assembled platform constructed on barges in international waters, was visible on the horizon. Captain, called General Rivera, approaching with a tablet in hand. "You've been selected for the negotiation team." Maya felt her stomach tighten. "Sir, your analysis of their communication patterns impressed the Secretary General. And frankly, you're one of the few people who's actually studied their messages in depth rather than just reacting to them." "I'm not a diplomat," she protested. "None of us are diplomats for this," Rivera replied grimly. "There's no protocol for negotiating humanity's survival." 4 hours later, Maya found herself on the floating platform, part of a small delegation of 12 humans selected to represent Earth. The structure was Spartan, a circular table surrounded by chairs, open to the sky, with only a simple canopy for shade. "Why here?" asked one of the delegates, looking around at the empty ocean stretching to the horizon. "Neutral ground," Maya replied. "No nation's territory. Also, minimal civilian exposure if things go badly." The delegate's face paled, but before she could respond, a ripple appeared in the air above the platform. Reality seemed to fold, and suddenly a shuttlecraft materialized 20 meters above them. It descended silently, its hull shimmering with an opalescent glow that hurt the eyes if viewed directly. When the craft landed, a seam appeared in its seamless surface, widening into an entrance. 7 figures emerged, tall, slender beings with silvery skin and elongated features. They wore no obvious protective gear despite Earth's alien environment, though Maya noticed subtle shimmer around each of them, perhaps personal force fields. The apparent leader stepped forward. Unlike the others, whose skin was uniformly silver, this being had intricate patterns etched across its visible surfaces, glowing faintly from within. "I am Grand Arbiter Vexrel," it announced, its mouth not moving as the words formed directly in Maya's mind. "You have created a situation without precedent." Secretary General Okafor stepped forward. "We are honored by your presence, Grand Arbiter. Earth welcomes peaceful dialogue." "Your welcome is noted, though unnecessary," the Arbiter replied. "I am here to understand your rejection of Confederate protection. It suggests either dangerous irrationality or..." The being paused, its silver eyes scanning each human face, "a significant misunderstanding of your position." Maya watched the exchange, noticing subtle movements among the alien delegation, the equivalent of whispered asides or significant glances. Their communication wasn't entirely telepathic. They were signaling to each other in ways they thought humans wouldn't notice. When the Arbiter began explaining the benefits of Confederate membership again, Maya decided to risk interruption. "Grand Arbiter," she said, stepping forward, "if I may ask, how many civilizations have joined your confederacy?" The alien's attention shifted to her, multiple eyes blinking in sequence. "The Confederacy encompasses 817 member species across 12,000 systems. And how many of those members joined with terms similar to those offered to Earth?" A pause. 742 are incorporated under protected status. Maya nodded. "And how many of those have since achieved full member status with technological parity and self-governance?" The Arbiter's skin patterns pulsed brighter. "This line of questioning is irrelevant to." 23, interrupted one of the other aliens, a female-appearing being with more elaborate patterns than the others. 23 species have achieved advancement from protected status in the Confederacy's history. Maya heard murmurs behind her as the human delegation processed this revelation. The Arbiter turned to the female alien, communicating in rapid pulses of light that Maya couldn't interpret. "And how long," Maya continued, "does advancement typically take?" The female alien, whom Maya realized must be Overseer Kurzana based on previous communications, answered before the Arbiter could stop her. "The average period of protected status is approximately 12,000 standard cycles." Maya did a quick mental calculation based on the timing references in earlier messages, so about 8,000 Earth years. The Arbiter's patterns flashed angrily. "Enough. Your questions demonstrate your species' immaturity. You cannot comprehend the complexities of interstellar governance. The Confederacy has maintained peace across a quarter of this galaxy for nearly 1,000,000 of your years. We don't doubt your accomplishments, Maya replied carefully. But Earth has its own complex history of relations between technologically unequal societies. When advanced nations have claimed to protect less developed ones, the results have rarely benefited the protected. You compare us to yourselves. The Arbiter's tone carried clear indignation. Your species still engages in internal warfare. You poison your own atmosphere and deplete your resources without coordination. We're imperfect, acknowledged Secretary General Okafor, but we're learning. In the past century, we've reduced the percentage of our population living in poverty from over 80% to under 10%. We've eliminated diseases that once killed millions. We've begun to address our environmental impact. Progress isn't linear, but it's real. And we're just beginning, added Maya. Imagine what humanity might accomplish in the next century, or the next millennium, if allowed to develop on our own terms. The meeting continued for hours as the sun crossed the sky and eventually dipped toward the horizon. The Draylen presented detailed arguments for Confederate membership, citing protection from other, less benevolent spacefaring species and access to technologies that would eventually be shared. The human delegation listened, questioned, and respectfully but firmly maintained their position. Earth would welcome relations with the Confederacy, but as equals, not subjects. As darkness fell, lights activated around the platform, illuminating the increasingly tense negotiation. The Arbiter finally rose to its full height, towering over the seated humans. Your obstinance is noted, it said coldly. Be aware that the Confederacy has never failed to incorporate a world deemed valuable for membership. Maya felt her heart racing but kept her voice steady. And we've noted that you've never explicitly threatened us with violence. Perhaps because force would undermine the Confederacy's founding principles of order and peace. The Arbiter's patterns pulsed rapidly. You presume to know our principles. We've studied your communications carefully, Maya replied. Your language consistently emphasizes harmony, order, and protection, not conquest. We believe the Confederacy values stability above all. Forcibly subjugating a resistant species seems inconsistent with that value. A long silence followed. The Arbiter and the Overseer exchanged complex pattern sequences. Finally, the Arbiter spoke again. You are correct that violent subjugation is not our preferred method. However, there are many forms of pressure that can be applied without overt violence, such as the trade embargo you implied earlier. Maya asked. Isolation can be difficult, but humanity has thrived in isolation thus far. And if your concern is truly our development, isolation would only slow that process, not prevent it. Another pause, longer this time. The alien delegation conferred among themselves, patterns flashing in sequences too complex for human eyes to follow. Finally, the Overseer stepped forward. Perhaps, she said, her mental voice softer than the Arbiter's, there exists a compromise that serves both our interests. By dawn, a framework had been established. Earth would remain sovereign, but would accept Confederate observers who would monitor human development without interference. Limited cultural and scientific exchange would begin immediately, with technology transfers to occur on a carefully negotiated schedule. Most importantly, Earth would gain observer status in the Confederacy Council, not as a protected species, but as a probationary member with the potential for full status in the future. As the alien delegation prepared to depart, Overseer Kirazana approached Maya privately. Your negotiation approach was unexpected, she said, her patterns forming subtle waves that Maya interpreted as thoughtfulness. In 8,000 cycles of diplomatic service, I have never encountered a pre-interstellar species that negotiated terms rather than accepting them. Maya smiled. Humanity has a history of exceeding expectations. Indeed, I believe we have significantly underestimated your potential. The Overseer's patterns shifted to a configuration Maya hadn't seen before. The Arbiter would not wish me to say this, but I look forward to seeing what your species will become. As the alien shuttle rose silently into the dawn sky, folding back into whatever dimensional space it traversed, Maya watched with a mixture of exhaustion and hope. Humanity had faced its first cosmic test and emerged with its dignity and independence intact. The path ahead would not be easy. Earth would need to unite as never before, accelerating development while maintaining the delicate diplomatic balance with the Confederacy. But for the first time, humans looked to the stars not just with wonder, but with the knowledge that they belonged there, not as protected subjects, but as equals. Humanity had taken its first defiant stand among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same.